Good evening. This Shabbat, we celebrate three distinct events. Number one, it is Shabbat, but it is also Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first day of the month of Adar, in which we are told, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, when Adar arrives, our joy increases. Finally, it is also Shabbat Shkalim, which describes the half shekels which were collected by Moses in the desert in order to build the tabernacle, and which were a continual feature of the Jewish people during the existence of the temple, in order to pay for the upkeep of the temple. So, in addition to the regular Parsha, we read from the Rosh Chodesh sacrifices in Parshas Pinchas as well, and also from the opening verses of Parshat Ki Tisa, dealing with the half shekel. We would normally take out 3 Torahs this Shabbat. What's the purpose of reading about the Shkalim? You see, before the age of mass communication, the Torah readings were a very effective form of advertising, conveying to the people various things that they needed to know. In our case, that the annual collections of the half shekels needed for the temple upkeep has now officially begun. Although the temple is long gone, we still believe in its eventual reestablishment with the coming of the Mashiach. And as we know, this can take place any day. It is therefore appropriate to read this parsha even in our own time when it is less practical. However, I'd like to suggest that there might be a very practical and real reason to read this parsha even today. It can also serve as a reminder to us that the holidays of Purim and Pesach are just around the corner, and that for many in the Jewish community, these holidays are often dreaded because of the financial strain which it puts on our families, and this applies especially to the making of Pesach. And when we speak of this particular year, this is especially true today when many in our community are out of work due to the pandemic. So the time has come to remind ourselves to start collecting our shekels and to give generously to the upcoming appeals which we will be making in the future for the poor in Israel, as well as right here at home. Now a few words on our Parsha. Parshas Mishpatim deals mostly with the area of Jewish law which we call Choshen Mishpat, or civil law, and describes in a general fashion many aspects of said laws, such as property, inheritance, laws of sale, debts and loans, torts, as well as some examples of family law and criminal law as well. Now, by presenting these rules right after the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which we read last week, perhaps the Torah wishes to convey to us, as well as to the newly established people of Israel in that generation, that Judaism is unlike any religion on earth. Not only does Judaism maintain religious imperatives and furnish us with spiritual expressions such as prayer, tzedakah, or the performing of acts of loving kindness, gemilut chasadim, But in addition, it also contains its own unique laws of the daily, mundane rules of life, jurisprudence, which every society requires in order to function in a good way. But our jurisprudence rules are fully intertwined and enmeshed with the religion itself. So, for example, when someone pays damages to an injured party or resolves a financial dispute with his neighbor, he not only rights a wrong, but he rather fulfills a mitzvah, which should be his primary motivation. This idea is echoed in the words of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in Pirkei Avot, who states, "Upon three pillars the world exists, on justice, truth, and peace." One interesting rule, which many find a bit surprising, is the fact that when someone causes an injury to his fellow man, he is, among other obligations, required to pay medical, doctor bills, until that injured person achieves a complete recovery. The Torah tells us, "Rak shivto yitain," he shall pay unemployment for the man's loss of his working capacity. Ve rapo yirapeh, he should also pay his medical bills. Question is, why does the Torah need to tell us that? Isn't that a minor detail? It should be obvious. You put your friend in the hospital, you should be obligated to pay, right? Well, on further reflection, perhaps not. Interestingly, the Torah mentions the word rofei, or reform, refuah, some 67 times throughout Tanakh. And it is usually used in the sense of being attributed to God. God is our doctor. God heals the people. He is the ultimate doctor of the sick in the world. Only here, in this one instance, in Mishpatim, does it refer to the more common usage, to a human healer. One might walk away with the impression that it is wrong to exchange God's divine healing with that of an imperfect human one. And indeed, there are plenty of religious sects who practice just that. However, what the Torah is telling us is that in Judaism, the exact opposite is true. The rabbis derive from this one instance that mikan shitnitna rishus l'rofei l'rapot. From here we learn that doctors have permission to ply their craft. How are we to understand this? Rav Kook, in a famous essay in Olat Re'iyah, explains that the human body is an organic whole. The functions of both body and soul are interconnected. And as a result, one can never truly know all of the possible outcomes or side effects of a given procedure or of any medication or vaccine. Even in our sophisticated generation of the 21st century, our knowledge is still woefully limited. How can we even deign to deliver medications with full confidence? One may, therefore, be tempted to draw the conclusion that the only solution to health issues is to pray to God. and hope for the best. The Torah, while it favors praying, rejects this idea that it is only prayer that helps. Such an approach could easily be applied to all aspects of life. Any effort on our part to improve our lives, to go to work, to use science and technology, to advance the standard of living of the world, should be rejected on the grounds that we lack all the knowledge possible to assure that no negative consequences would come from the changes which we are employing. In other words, why should we attempt to create a better toaster oven if it might explode? We don't know. Rav Kook put it this way: the progress of human knowledge and all of the results of human inventions is ultimately all the work of God. These advances make their appearance in the world according to mankind's needs in their time and generation. So we have to make our hishtadlus to do the very best that we can and put our faith in God that He is teaching us and guiding us in the right way to pursue our own healing. Baruch Hashem, we all know and are excited over the fact that God has granted the medical researchers of our day, many of whom in Israel, by the way, to develop a vaccine against the scourge of COVID-19. Not to accept it, not to take that vaccine, is totally wrong, especially on religious grounds. It would be a clear violation of Rak Shivto Yitain Verapo Yirapeh. From here we derive that the doctor may practice medicine. Let's not forget that the art of medicine has been practiced for the last 5,000 years, and not always to great results. But what is interesting is that it often did. With the medical knowledge, the limited medical knowledge that people had before 2 centuries ago, they nevertheless succeeded. People went to doctors. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants mankind to make our best efforts. Baruch Hashem, today we're living in miraculous times, and we have vanquished many, many diseases, and will in the future, with God's help, vanquish many more. So let us remember that little pasuk, Rak Shivto Yitain Verapo Yirapeh. Shabbat Shalom.